Today, I'm with the first pick, here with Mike Renner, Pushing the Pile podcast, draft analyst as well. We're here at the University of North Texas practice facility, day 2 Shrine Bowl in the books. And I'll see if you were paying attention yesterday, Mike. How many days until the 2025 NFL draft?
88.
88 days. Shout out to Michael Irvin. Shout out to Garrett Padell, Cowboys beat reporter just off screen here. He's a big Michael Irvin guy. So what do you think? I mean, no quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, but there are other quarterbacks here. We can talk about those guys in a second, but I'll give you the floor. Who do you want to focus on first in terms of having a pretty good day 2 of practices?
Yeah, there are a few guys. So a lot of the guys you mentioned yesterday, we can get to again at some point.
Sure.
But I thought the guys you mentioned yesterday were again the stars. But 2 more guys that I thought really impressed me that we probably didn't touch on yesterday. I don't think we touched on C.J. West from Indiana, defensive tackle. He was easily like the craftiest guy in terms of the pass rushing drills. Like he had a number of moves at his disposal. Just basically, you saw him on another level of his competition. Like he was a guy that just looked like he didn't belong here, right?
By the way, that showed up on tape too.
Yeah, it was great. Obviously, it was Kent State transfer to Indiana this past fall, and was a big reason why Indiana was one of the best run defenses in all of college football. But also, he can rush the passers too. A versatile 3-down sort of defensive tackle. I actually know his agent pretty well here, Brad Spielberger, former colleague at PFF, and Brad said, going into this day, they thought, maybe top 100. I think after this weekend, he's definitely going to be a top 100 guy.
And it's funny that you say that because as you do this year after year, you sort of, at least this is my experience. When I started, you just assume that if you see something, it can't be right if other people aren't agreeing with it. And what you find out is no one knows anything. So when I watched C.J. West, I was like, if this guy goes second round, just based on what I'm watching here, I could understand why. So to your point, going from day 2 fringe guy to day 2 solidifying day 2, that would not surprise me.
Yeah, and he's definitely the type of body where I think everyone wants that defensive tackle that's it doesn't really matter where you put him. He could play nose tackle for you. He could play 3-tech for you. And it's like maybe he's not – reminds me kind of like a Dalvin Tomlinson, where Dalvin never had like a great position, never had was never a dominant football player, but was a guy that you could trust in the run game. You could trust to be an impact pass rusher. And if you get that, second, third round, those guys end up signing really big second deals, it ends up seeming like. So
and they're bargains. Like when Jordan Phillips talked about Keanu Benton, we talked about yesterday, second-round pick, who's a bargain and will probably get paid handsomely when his contract is due. A guy that I watched in the pass rush drills, not in one-on-ones yet, but I watched his tape and I was impressed. He's an older player. I think he's married, Tyler Batty, 92, out of BYU. And he looks like someone you would build in the lab or on Madden if you're trying to create a defensive lineman, like historically a 3-4 guy. But he can go out wide and power's his thing. But there's a place for that as well. But he's a guy that stuck out to me that I don't think we've talked about yet. And if we're talking about the D-line guys, I thought I'd throw him in there.
That is one of the biggest things in person versus on tape that 100%. Really stands out to you is frames. You can see measurables. You can see. You'll get the numbers from the combine, right? You'll get how long their arms are, how big their hands are, but you don't really get like a feel for how broad their shoulders are, how what kind of specimens these dudes really are. We see a guy like that walk up to some of these other defensive ends here who are like 6'2", 250.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's just a different cat altogether.
It's different, and it's important to see that. I didn't think Shedeur was going to be as tall as he was. I didn't know until I saw him in person. My guy. Who's my guy? Who's the quarterback? Kyle McCord. I'm at the point in the process where I forget everyone's name.
How many guys got?
He's 6'2". I have a lot.
Yeah.
He's 6'2.5". I didn't know if he was going to be that tall.
Syracuse actually has prospects, so you do have a lot of guys.
Syracuse has prospects. Before we get to make this the Syracuse portion of the show, another guy that loved his tape, and I got glimpses of him here, and I'm going to have to watch more. Noel Williams, the cornerback out of Cal.
Okay.
I think he has a chance to be a day 2 guy. He probably was a day 2 guy coming in. I think he has a chance to help himself in terms of how high he goes. I always come back, and this is unfair to Peyton Thorne, the quarterback here from Auburn, but he had a 5-interception afternoon against Cal, and Noel had one of the best interceptions I saw all season. But that showed up week in and week out for him.
Yeah, I think this cornerback group down here, if you're saying who won the week, was it corners or wide receivers? I think the corners had a better week than a lot of the wide receivers.
You have a guy too.
Yeah, I mean Kobe Bryant was the one who was just like the star. They were talking about anyone who really won the week, because a one-on-one wide receiver versus cornerback drill is set up for the wide receiver.
100%.
You have no help. There's no pass rush. He can run a triple move if he wants to. And he was a guy that even on those double moves, even on things where he should have a distinct disadvantage, he was consistently at the advantage and had the play of the weekend when at the catch point he one-handed stole it away from, I'm blanking on who exactly was the wide receiver, took it from him, intercepted it over the middle of the football field in the team drills, which, like, if you have his sort of the feistiness he plays with, the twitch that he plays with, and then you can ball skills like that guy made himself some money this week.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it yesterday on the podcast or not, but when I talked to him yesterday, I said to him, hey, man, you had 4 interceptions last year and no drops. He said, yeah, I did. He said the year before I had 3 drops, and I'm still angry about it. So he takes it very seriously. I think he's a former wide receiver as well. I think when he said he got to Kansas, he was both, and then he moved over to the defensive side of the ball. So he has those ball skills. And to your point, it certainly showed here. I'm going to go in the Kobe Bryant trying to think of the way to put this, sort of the Kobe Bryant stature category with Shamari Simmons. Had a big interception in the first practice, the safety out of Arizona State, who's also a hard hitter. I was talking to Garrett about it in the game against Iowa State. He got thrown out for targeting against Beck, I believe. But he plays with an edge, and they don't seem to know that they're sub 200 substantially in some situations. But, yeah, it's great to see, and you and I just talked about this on HQ. If Kobe Bryant were 6'1", 195, we're probably having serious conversations about how high he goes.
Yeah, he's definitely, from just like a pure tape, pure physical ability, much better than the other guys here. But it's just 171. I think a lot of teams saw Emmanuel Forbes and the crash and burn that was his time.
He was also a ball
Washington,
skills guy.
That I think you're going to be wary of guys that skinny. But again, if you're going to be that skinny, you got to have a play style to match. I'll throw one more name out there that really needed to have a big week or big weekend and has. Ja'Cory Cross-Kamara, the Arizona running back. I say Arizona. He played one game at Arizona before they held him out for eligibility concerns this past fall. I thought in that one game, he actually transferred from New Mexico State. In that one game, I was very impressed with just like he looked bigger. So he was always a super undersized guy. 6-year running back, but was in the 180s to low 190s. Now up over 200 pounds, hasn't lost the juice, hasn't lost the burst, and had a number of plays where there's a small crease in the defensive line this week that only, he had to attack at full speed to get through it, and he did. And that's what you want to see from running back projecting to the NFL is those guys who have no hesitation running at, limited gaps because they're all limited gaps once you get to the NFL.
It's funny you say that. Cody Kiner was a guy that I liked a lot coming in, just watching his tape out of Cincy, and then Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech. And they all feel like they're all in the same bucket. And Rocket Sanders is here as well. Had a couple good runs, but you were talking about this yesterday. It's hard to be that size and be explosive. And it feels like outside of the Jahmyr Gibbses of the world and even the Bijan Robinson, it feels like the running backs are starting to morph into what I envision some iteration of Jaylen Warren. Like it feels like they're that a little smaller, a little shiftier. They can run between the tackles, but they can bounce it as well. A little bit in the pass game. There's no more Herschel Walkers of the world.
Well, you see, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, Jaylen Warren, all the same mold where it's like they're scraping 200 pounds, but they're nimble.
Right.
You have to be able to find holes in today's NFL because there are, with light boxes, there is a crease somewhere. It's not always where the blocking was supposed to have it, but it's those guys who can really bounce behind the line of scrimmage that are having the most success at the NFL level right now. Obviously, there's always going to be specimens. There's always going to be your Ashton Genties who are just different cats altogether.
Yeah.
But more and more the guys who are hitting on day 3, because all the guys I just mentioned were all day 3 or UDFAs. So those are the guys that you want, and I think Merritt fits that bill.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and this was tough for me, and it still is, when you're watching running backs trying to figure out who's who and how they sort of rank, and I'm sure people understand this, but I was a little slow in the uptake on this one. But vision is so incredibly important behind the line of scrimmage and if you stop your feet and you can't start your feet, that's also a concern. And a lot of these guys don't have any issue getting back to hitting 60 once they hit 0 and restarting the engine, and that's what makes them interesting and draftable and so on and so forth. They just won't be outside of Ashton Genty first-round picks.
Yeah, did you see anyone? I know people like Caleb Johnson from Iowa. People like Amarian Hampton from North Carolina. Did you see them sneak into round one? I think the more I watch the top-end guys, the more I think there's probably enough guys to fill out round one before I'm really pulling the trigger on the running backs. And not only that, there's enough running backs that into day two that – if I'm looking at pick 25, why not just pick another one at pick 55? 57?
Right, 100%. Yeah. I think that Hampton's my running back 2. I have to double check. I watched Caleb Johnson in the fall, and I was like, okay. I went back and watched him. I felt a little better about it, but I would not feel comfortable taking him in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. He's like the size speed guy, but I don't think his tape was such that I'm taking him that high.
And to your point, however many years ago that was, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, all those guys that went, Cam Akers, all those guys went in the second round. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the bottom of the first.
But you didn't want to, right? So you didn't want to be the team that drafted him.
So if they're guys, just stick to the board, Mike. That's all you got to do. Don't be a hero. All right, let's talk about some receivers. I'll save your guy for you. I'm going to talk about some other guys. I'll start with Ricky White III. I think we talked about him yesterday at UNLV. And I'm going to talk about him not because he's dropped a couple passes here, but special teams. He's still playing like his hair's on fire special teams-wise, just in team drills, and I love that, and he's going to get drafted for that reason. But I'm going to talk about Will Shepard.
Okay.
We talked about on HQ, the long wide receiver from Colorado, and I was on the sidelines there, and someone threw a corner, and I thought it was going to hit the back wall on the sidelines there. He actually made the catch, got his feet in bounds, and I did not get run over. So it's a win all the way around. I think you were almost in a near collision situation as well with someone else. So I want to talk about him. He had a nice little afternoon, morning, and then Sam Brown out of Miami, who is sort of flown under the radar, and he's going to have to struggle to probably hear his name called on day 3, but team drills, he made tough catches over the middle, and what you like to see is the ball sticking to your hands and then completing the catch.
Shepard's a big-time vertical guy. Like he is a prototypical outside wide receiver that gets down the football field and then can make those plays like you mentioned at the catch point, go up and over the top of opposing cornerbacks. So it's good to see a guy do that then in this situation. The guy I like though probably the most in terms of like how I felt before till now, or I'll say 2 guys, and I think I mentioned them both yesterday. Jackson Meeks from Syracuse, just because he feels like a tailor-made wide receiver 3 in the NFL that you can just rely on. One of those guys that he can get open in a pinch. He may not be explosive down the football field, but he has the size to secure catches over the middle of the football field. And if he's going up against your cornerback 3, he's probably going to win those matchups more often than not. And then Efton Chisholm, man, the guy keeps the slot wide receiver not fast whatsoever. I'm not looking forward to what he's going to run in the 40 at the combine, but I mean, prototypical slot wide receiver. He is
By the way, not to
strong.
interrupt you, but you know who's looking forward to him running a 4.65? Les Snead, so you can draft him.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's the type of guy he is. It's just that at the line of scrimmage, when you're 5'10", 195, I mean, that's like a running back build. So it's easier for those guys to work through the hands of a cornerback. And so he's got that short area twitch, the quickness, and that fluidity to kind of just get in and out of, he ran a ton of whip routes, a ton of like space routes over the middle of the football field. And I thought he was very effective at them and knew where to find the space between zone coverage. That's the job of a slot wide receiver. Obviously limited. Not a lot of teams love pure slots anymore, but you're like using that role. People want more versatile guys. But if you have that role and he's available on day 3, the guy's probably going to fill it pretty well.
Yeah. Let me ask you, did you see when he had his helmet on? Is the neck beard still a thing?
I didn't actually. I don't know. Okay. I assume it probably comes and goes with a guy.
I hope he would keep it. Yeah, that's got to be his thing. And, once he becomes popular, that'll be a thing that fans wear to the game.
He'll have it all the way down like Cooper Kupp in like 5 years.
If you're going to do it, go all in. All right, those are the 2 guys you mentioned. What am I looking at here? We don't like to don't want to crush these guys, but we should talk about a couple guys. Yeah. Nick Nash.
I mean, he's probably the biggest name coming in here, right? The most
huge
people knew
numbers.
about him. He was a finalist for the Blitnikoff Award.
Yeah.
So if you're finalist for the Blitnikoff Award, usually that's like a good sign going forward, right? But I agree, he was not.
And just want to see more. Like, he made contested catches, and that's going to be his future, but consistency and what can he do to sort of change your opinion given that he is who he is?
Yeah, I mean, I had a tweet about him actually after the Blitnikoff voting.
How'd that go?
It didn't go well. I didn't know there were that many San Jose State fans, I'm being real. But I just said, I know he won the Triple Crown, but I didn't vote for him because I still think the postseason award should have some semblance of like, how good are you actually at football? Not just stats. Stats matter. You can't just be in a vacuum. Like, I'm not going to vote for Luther Burden because I think he's super talented.
I think the problem is you treat Twitter like you're in a classroom and you expect to get rational responses. And
no, that's valid. But I responded with some irrationality myself, so I maybe brought it on a little bit myself. But you kind of saw it on tape that he was a little bit limited, but got pumped targets. And scouts will not, scout talent. They don't scout numbers at the end of the day. Numbers are good. You want numbers, obviously. You want numbers in the NFL, but you still get paid. You get drafted based off of your potential, and that's usually physical potential. And with him, when you're struggling in a situation like this, that's when you're a little worrisome. So a guy who, probably, like I said, you probably know his name. You probably heard about him. Expecting him to be a top 100 pick based off the numbers he put up, it ain't going to happen.
It feels like, and actually this guy ran way faster than I thought he would, but I didn't think he played this fast at Wake Forest, A.T. Perry.
Okay.
And I think it's a guy that's going to have to make his living in the middle of the field, running in breakers, running comebacks, and because you're not going to create separation consistently because you have to use your size to create the separation.
Who was the name that came to mind for me was who was like the Oregon State wide receiver who then like ended up having like a little cup of coffee with the Giants where he was kind of a thing for a second?
I just talked about him yesterday with a former Giants.
Who was that? That's who he reminds me of a little bit.
Isaiah Hodgkins.
Hodgins, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
a good call.
Where he's just kind of like a little stiff.
Yeah.
That he's never going to be a go-to guy. But I think if he finds a place where, he runs a certain route tree, I think he could end up being effective.
But the lesson there is that if you're nearly perfect on everything you do, you can make a career out of it.
Yes.
The issue is there's no wiggle room.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, and Za Frazier at UTSA, who Brian McFadden, our colleague, Lee Douzable, our colleague, we're talking him up in the fall. I think Lee called a couple of his games, and I watched him. I love his tape. Hasn't flashed yet here. He hasn't had a Kobe Bryant flash, but that's a pretty big flash. I just want to see a little bit more consistency in the practices, and I would still take him top 100 all day long, and probably higher than that once I.
Okay, I actually hadn't watched his tape, so you're gonna have to.
Oh, good, yeah. I'll be interested to hear what you think, because he's first of all, I don't know what his measurements were, but he looks to be 6'2 plus, maybe 6'1.5", and he's long. Looks like he has long arms. He can run. He can change direction. All the things that you want out of a cornerback. Just got beat a couple times in 1-on-1.
I want to know if Za is short for something, or if that's like.
Yeah, I don't know.
The full. I don't even know what.
I don't know if it's pronounced A, like
Z-A-H.
the way Suvone pronounces his name, Siobhan Rebel.
Dude.
So
Savon, that one. Did you asked him about that, right? About his name? How where did that come from?
I did not.
Okay.
I just got the pronunciation right before because he was
surprised
him
with that.
He goes, "Oh, you got my name right."
But Shavon is somehow pronounced
Suvone.
Savon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike.
Just like it reads.
Did you get my Mike joke?
Oh yeah. Okay. Now I did.
Let's talk about before we talk about the quarterbacks. Let's talk quickly about some offensive linemen we loved. I know you got your guy, my guy, and I just watched him during team drills at the end, run blocking. He had a little struggle in pass pro. He was good. He had a little struggle in run blocking, keeping his feet a couple times, so that's not the end of the world. But Thomas Perry out of Middlebury, and they're Division III, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh man, he was fun. I give him credit, man. He was locking on to these guys, and they were struggling to get off the blocks, and that's all you want from a guard.
Feldman, freaks list guy.
He was?
He was.
Oh, great.
For
Congratulations,
his lifting
Thomas.
numbers.
Okay.
So he's going to blow up the combine in the bench press. And works with Duke Manyweather out of here. So the O-line guru. So
good.
It's a good combination.
Good. I hope he gets drafted because he's fun.
I assume he will at this point after that. And I think his frame is center.
It looks to be, right?
Sub 32-inch arms.
I was going to say, if you told me he had 25-inch arms, I would believe you.
The guy's, compact, but that's how you bench the numbers that he does. So
right, exactly.
Yeah, I think he's a guy who.
I'm glad I watched him, and he had a good little team session.
Mm-hmm. He'll get drafted at this point for sure.
All right, who you got?
Gosh, it's the same guys as yesterday.
That's fine.
John Williams continues to be my favorite offensive lineman here. Not only in the one-on-ones, he had one where he kind of got lost on an inside move. Happens, obviously. But won the rest of his reps in the one-on-ones, and then in the team drills, I was impressed more even today in the run game with the stuff he did. He took, who's the SMU defensive end? Elijah Roberts, who had kicked inside, took him like 3 yards off the ball. One-on-one. So he's a guy that I wish he was a little like better shape.
Yeah.
You see a gut hanging off of him, and you're like, okay, we can.
So
we
you
can
have
get that. If we get rid of that, we have a guy because he's 324 with a gut.
Let me ask you though:
he can drop 15 pounds?
Are you body shaming the fat guys? Why do they need to have a?
They do.
They can't have a gut as an offensive lineman.
You want a little, if it's more if it's necessary. If you're like a 280 guy and you need to get to 300, we can put a gut on.
Gotcha.
He's a 324 guy. You don't need to be more than like 310 to be attacked.
Oh, I see. He can drop.
He can drop like 15. I think it's only going to help his game.
You don't want a 324 six-pack. You're saying just drop a few pounds.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure because 324, you're asking for a lot.
Yeah. You're not going to be trim. Not a lot of guys are. Jordan Phillips, though.
Right.
That guy was a trim 320.
He didn't get the memo about having a belly. Was there another offensive lineman, or was?
The Montana State offensive lineman.
Okay, Weir.
Mike Weir, yeah.
Marcus Weir.
Mike Weir is a golfer out of
Yeah.
Canada.
Canadian.
He still impressed me, I think.
Good.
Center is probably his best position also, limited size-wise, but he had a pass-off because they, for day one they were doing pure 101s. Today they were doing some stunts.
Yeah.
He had a couple of pass-offs where it was like the body control to pass off, recover on the opposite side. That I think that shines a lot of light on who has like the goods to play at the NFL level, because you can fake it a little bit in one-on-ones, but you can't fake that where you really have to contort, twist, turn. Those really show guys who has it, who doesn't. He looked the part in that.
And I'm sure there are a million underrated things that you look for, but one of the things that catch my attention is like how good are you at identifying and passing off the stunts, because the quarterback is staring down the gun, especially in the two gaps and the coming up the middle, and if he's getting hit in the face all the time, like we were talking about yesterday.
We'll just watch the Houston Texans.
I was going to say between CJ and Shador, it was sort of that situation all the time, guys struggling to figure those things out. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's end on the quarterback discussion. Shador's long gone. I went and wisely read some of the YouTube comments from our podcast yesterday. People were angry at us for not giving Shador more love. I thought we did a pretty good job of loving up Shador.
To be real.
Keeping it real. But he's fine. He doesn't, number one, care what we have to say, and I thought we were pretty laudatory in our praise of what he decided to do. I would like to see him throw selfishly, but that's just me. I would imagine the Titans and the Browns and the Giants feel similarly, but that's we can talk about that later. But let's talk about the guys that are here. So you can add to the names if I forget. So Kyle McCord's here out of Syracuse, Max Brosmer out of Minnesota, Peyton Thorne out of Alabama out of Auburn, Cam Miller out of North Dakota State, and Garber's out of UCLA, I believe. Kyle McCord's getting drafted. Is anyone else getting drafted, do you think?
I don't know.
And this is a slim QB class.
Minnesota QB, possibly.
Yeah, UNH transfer Max Brosmer.
But I think McCord was the one who just like throw for throw was the most accurate, and that's still like something that matters if you're drafting a guy on day 3.
Yeah,
he actually
100%.
hit stand next to somebody hit in the face on the sidelines, and he said it hurt. So he said the arm strength was better than maybe he expected with that ball.
And it hurt after the deflection.
It hurt after a little deflection.
Yeah, so Kyle McCord bringing it. So he's taller than I thought he was. His arm looks a little better in person than it did when I saw him in the fall. And is there an example of a guy this year who's helped himself more than Kyle McCord?
Whew, that's a good question.
Just in terms of the quarterbacks, at least, because he went from
Cam Ward.
Cam Ward, yes. Okay, fair enough. Cam Ward.
Will Howard.
And Will Howard.
We'll see where Will Howard ends up, but I think he went from just like fun transfer to DJ talking about he's a top 50 guy on his board, so we'll see.
Okay, that's a little rich.
Yeah, we all know it's
I did have you and I talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago. After we talked about it, a scout texted me and said he said Will Howard is probably going to go for Quinn Ewers, because you and I were discussing that at the time. So yeah, Will Howard helped himself. Although Kyle McCord, you could argue for the first 3 quarters of the season, Ohio State fans probably wished he was still at Ohio State.
I was trolling my Ohio State buddies all year long. I was like sending them McCord clips because he was awesome. He was much better.
Dealing,
and he still like. If you're being real, if you put him behind that in that Ohio State offense, they still would have won the national championship. They might have even gone undefeated this year.
Well, that's producer Debo, who we work with all the time. That's as a Penn State guy. He goes, if you give Drew Aller that offensive line those playmakers, he's probably going to be the first overall pick.
Yeah, true.
All right, that's it for the old With the First Pick podcast here on location in Denton, Texas, University of North Texas. Shrine Bowl practice day 2 in the books. Tomorrow will be a practice, and then we'll be heading down to Mobile, Alabama.
Yes, sir.
And we'll be firing up the old podcast from there in a few days. So we'll see you guys then.